Thank you to new patrons Mr. Shroom, Sevi S, and Colby K. Kevin Nanny, better known as PPMD, is one of the greatest Super Smash Bros. Melee players in history, and a member of an elite group known as the Gods of Smash. This select group of 5 players were once untouchable, rarely losing to anyone but themselves. PPMD set himself apart from the other gods with a less flashy and more elegant playstyle, known for a mastery of the neutral game. He is also famous as a dual main, an expert of both Falco and Marth. High-level competition can be a stressful experience, full of mental hurdles, and to tackle some of these challenges, PPMD has looked to philosophy and concepts like mindfulness. He even took inspiration from Bruce Lee and his book Tao of Jeet Kune Do, a deep dive into the legendary martial artist's ethos. PPMD has cultivated the reputation of a wise sage within the Melee community, and a fantastic teacher, not only for technical and fundamental knowledge, but also these mental hurdles that all competitors face. Unfortunately, PPMD has had his Melee career rudely interrupted by health issues that have made competition at a high level difficult for quite some time. But PPMD has remained an active member of the community in spite of this, especially since the release of Slippy Netplay, which has made this classic game more accessible than ever. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me on the fridge today, Kevin, and how are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be in the fridge, and thank you so much also for that lovely, balanced, and beautiful introduction. I appreciate the nuance.
Of course. And I gotta say, it's an honor. I'm a longtime fan of yours. And
Thank you, thank you.
back in the day, the documentary era of Melee, when a lot of new players were flooding into the community, I was one of them, and you were the player that pushed me to eventually go to my local tournaments and try out Falco.
How was it? How'd you do?
I was always pretty average, but I had fun.
That's what matters. That's what matters.
And I didn't stick with Falco, I will say. I eventually switched to Peach because she was easier, to be honest. Falco was hard.
Okay, what? Hey, listen, no shame in that. I mean, if you talk to Peach players today, they say she's pretty hard now, so that you wouldn't have escaped it in the end.
I mean, it's Melee. Everyone's a bit hard.
Yeah, it is true. That is true. You're not wrong.
But yeah, thank you so much. And I think every single guest I've had on this show, even though we're mostly Pokemon people, has also played Melee or at least Smash in some capacity. There's so much crossover. It's kind of crazy.
Melee really is, I think, in a really special position among gaming. I think it's had the longevity. It's had so many overlaps. I mean, when it was in MLG, in the early 2000s, there was crossover with Halo 2, for example, and that led into Ninja being someone that wanted to run a Melee tournament, or knowing about Melee, having a lot of respect for it. Even when Ninja was collabing with Drake, right? Like, you just all these big things happening. But then there's also been speedrunners. Melee and speedrunning were very hand in hand. They, Smash the Record was an event where Melee and speedrunning were done together. And so I think and so I'm not surprised to know that Pokemon's like that, but I would say I'm less informed about that. So I'm certainly, curious to hear what that's like, how maybe the Pokemon community finds interest in Melee, and maybe how, I think more Melee players are actually branching out into other games now, how Melee players might find interest in competitive Pokemon. So I don't know if that's something that you know about offhand, but that's something that's personally interesting to me, hearing you say that.
Yeah, Melee is definitely one of those games with a lot of crossover with fighting games, other grassroots esports like Halo, as you said. And I think Pokemon is a natural crossover. They're both Nintendo. I primarily played the old generations, especially Gen 3, which was around the same time as like GBA and GameCube, with the same era. So I think a lot of people grew up with both Gen 3 of Pokemon and Melee at the same time. And of course, there were the GameCube titles like Pokemon Colosseum and Pokemon XD that had integration with the Game Boy. Yeah, and I've actually played Netplay recently on Dolphin of Pokemon XD, which was very fun. And we're in talks about running that alongside Smash tournaments. I don't know how that will do logistically, but that could be really cool.
Yeah, I love this idea of innovating more with tournaments. I think in the wake of Slippy, tournament organizers have had to get much more creative. We recognize that in a world where people can boot up and be playing a game in 10 seconds, convincing them to instead get in a car or to pay someone else or whatever to go to a local and then pay to play to go 0-2 is maybe, is
Right.
maybe a
Yeah.
little bit of an ask, right? And so people are finding, more ways to, run amateur brackets and triple elimination and whatever else that there might be, other games, other formats, to keep people interested. And so I kind of like, this other thing where like this is another game. This is something that can bring in other people, and then maybe this is another chance for more cross community pollination. That option is always going to be there, and maybe I would, you're talking about Dolphin. Maybe there are going to be knock on effects. Thinking about it from Slippy getting rollback, or starting out with rollback, Dolphin getting rollback, to maybe other games also getting an improved netcode or some improved online experience that could maybe end up bridging more games together. I think that'd be really cool.
That would be cool. How familiar are you with competitive Pokemon out of curiosity?
Oh yeah, I was meaning to tell you this. Oh God, my knowledge. Let me tell you about this. Jimothy Cool. I watched a lot of False Swipe gaming videos 2 years ago, and last night in preparation, I watched a documentary on the history of Wolf Glick. So golly, I just know so much. So that being said, I'm basically a hyper casual. I kind of know some things, but not really. It would be cool if I knew more, but you'll have to forgive me if I'm not fully in the weeds here. But maybe that's okay. Maybe explaining Pokemon to me like I'm five will be useful for maybe some of the Melee players that might watch this.
Oh, that's all good. I think another part of the reason there's such a crossover is that Pokemon is kind of fighting game like in the way that you can make predictions and reads.
Yeah.
Because turns are simultaneous, so there's an element of mental game in it as well that is kind of similar to fighting games in Smash.
I have a question. If you're playing in person, I don't know if you know about this, but I've always wondered when they're playing in person, at the World Championships, is there an element of poker in that, where like you can body language, or you can fake like, ooh, I'm really nervous right now, and they're like, ooh, he's nervous, he's gonna swap here, but they
I
don't
think there
swap.
is, yes, because you're sitting in front of someone and there's facial expressions tells and stuff. I've only played in one in-person tournament. I usually play on Pokemon Showdown, which is the simulator.
Okay.
But I did give in-person tournaments a go for a bit, and I played against this guy who I think he like said out loud that he thought I was going to do this, and then it made me do something else, so that he got me like that.
No way.
He the way he did it was he was as if like he lost the game. He was like, "You're just going to sucker punch here," and it was a complete bluff or like a mental, and he totally owned me with that.
Oh no. So what do you think the adaptation is there? Do you think, like let's say you're there again and he's like, "Oh, he's going to sucker punch you." You go, I'm doing it. You better watch out." Like what do you think you do there?
I think the strat is probably, I mean, it's probably similar to poker where there's many ways to approach that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I would take the approach of like never absorb any information from the other person and just make decisions how I normally would. Don't get my decision making poisoned by
Right.
anything they're doing.
Right. Close off to that. I see. I think that's the stance I think a lot of people take. I think, hearkening back to Melee, we used to not wear headphones at tournaments. Golly, I don't know if even a lot of Melee viewers watching will understand that. But headphones at tournaments were actually rare. I mean, even 10 years ago it was pretty rare to be wearing headphones at tournaments. But it started becoming more common around that time. And I think, for the same reason as what you're saying, like, didn't want to be influenced by the crowd, didn't want to hear Hungry Box popping off next to them, whatever it was. There was always there were increasing reasons and pressures that you wanted to be shut out and just focus on the game, and so there was a lot of that, and so I imagine that instinct is part of where that comes into play for you. But I think in VGC, I don't think they have any noise canceling headphones they plug into their setup. I don't think. Maybe that's something.
I suppose you could just wear headphones with your Switch, just plug in an aux cord.
Okay, okay, an interesting innovation there. I don't know what the rules are on that, but that'd be fun. Maybe you could do the Leffen. You plug in and you listen to your classical music or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's lots of avenues. But that would be interesting to see if anything like that changes or gets challenged, or what the reasoning might be or not.
I suppose Melee tournaments are more modernized now with better tech. Back in the day, they didn't have the headphone setups or anything.
Well, it wasn't just that. I mean, it wasn't players in the In the old days, Jimothy Cool, in the old grassroots days, it wasn't just about having the tech or not. It was also about whether they thought whether people thought they needed it.
Right.
People there was often this spirit of, oh, let's figure this out ourselves, which is a spirit that we still carry forward to today, although it looks very different. But it's a let's figure this out ourselves. Let's not rely on extra help. Let's not do mid-set coaching. Let's not wear headphones because we, as competitors, quote unquote, should be able to handle the crowd. And there was always that desire to handle things yourself, to tough it out, and that's really how the community kind of endured this sort of spirit, this sort of pushing forward in that way. And again, that sort of changed in certain ways, but there's still that idea. There's still that feeling of let's do this ourselves. And so, when I think it was actually Wizro, someone who's still very successful today, I think ranked somewhere around eighth, if I remember correctly, in the recent summer ranking. Wizrobe was a player that really started adopting headphones early, and Wizrobe actually got, some flack for that. People saying, "Oh, so you can't handle the crowd," or "Oh, you need to shut this out." This
Yeah.
was there was pushback to this at the time, as there were to other norms changing. But he just kept putting them on. So what are you gonna do? You gonna yank him off his head? No, of course not. So uh, they they just became more common. More players were like, well, hey, maybe it's actually a good idea he's doing it. And some other people started doing it too. So now it's actually, if you're a top player, it's actually far more uncommon to go without headphones. It's far more common to wear them, actually. So it's interesting how that's changed.
Times are changing. Do you value that aspect of the game, managing the in tournament, like the crowd and like even the body language
Um,
of your opponent and that kind of thing? The poker
a,
stuff?
a lot of people don't like that stuff. I mean, you got to also think, a lot of people don't get into Melee to be on the big stage and the lights and with the crowd. Like, you don't get
Yeah.
into Melee to be famous and for the money and the clout, right? That's not, you could go other ways for that, right? It's not, I mean, like, there's an aspect to it that I'm sure maybe people are probably more interested in that now, but I don't think that's the primary motivator for people. I think it's more, you like this game, you think it's fun, you want to optimize. Maybe you think someone plays a whack character and you want to beat them, or maybe you think this person's a giant nerd, or you don't like the way they act, and so you want to mess them up, or you want to get to this rank, or whatever, right? You just want to get improved, and that's and you're a gamer and you're spending all your time on your own, so you're more interested in that aspect. You're less interested in the how do I prepare food, how do I optimize this experience, how much do I do fan interaction if I become famous enough, like these are aspects that I think people often don't like. And I think, it takes some time to sort of acclimate to that, to figure out, how this helps the community. And then I think if people stick with it long enough, how this can help themselves too. For example, I think, like let's say there are players that might come into a tournament in a bad mood. Like maybe something happened in their personal life. And a fan comes up to them and they're actually like, hey, I'm so glad you're here. I've been wanting to meet you forever. Can you sign this? I love what you do so much. Or maybe even you changed my life, right? You say, some big things like that are said. I've seen it, it's rare, but I've seen some players say, wow, fans or one fan came up and really turned this event around for me. And you don't need to be a top five player in the world for that to happen. There are people, I mean, there are people that are ranked in their state, that have fans in their state that might even say similar things to them, or at least be fans of them and really hype them up. That can be really helpful. So I think it's a matter of looking at it as, not objectively is not really the word. I think that word gets used in interesting ways a lot. But looking at it, from a multi-dimensional perspective, like, okay, what are the good things here? What are the things that we need to watch out for here? And the thing we need to watch out for is, if you try to take in too much of that fan feedback and you try to become dependent on it, then if you lose, or maybe you get upset and people go, oh, well, maybe they're not as good as I thought, or maybe this person's washed up or whatever, then maybe you take that a lot harder than you would ordinarily, right? And so I think there's a balancing act that people have to learn. And this is not just with fans. I don't mean to make this just about fans, but I think this is the easiest thing to understand. But there is this balancing act of how do we learn these extra skills, how to play SSBM in this case, or Pokemon or whatever it is, in tournament, and how do we, just get better at playing the game? And those are two separate skill sets, in my opinion. But you can, just like you can get better at practicing melee or tech skill, or reading your opponent in Pokemon or optimizing your team, you can also get better at events. You can manage jet lag differently. You can change how you eat. You can meditate there, exercise more. There are lots of things you can do to improve your competitive experience and improve your, human performance. And I think, this is the sports aspect of esports. And I think that this is something, we don't have sports psychologists, in these disciplines, but I think we absolutely, could benefit from them. Because we're all just kind of doing our own thing. But this is not really something that's talked about. It's maybe not so much of a sexy topic, or it's not something that you can say that will get you a bunch of views or whatever. But it's something that I think is real, and I think a lot of people can benefit from, and might make the experience a little less frustrating, and I hope more enjoyable. Because I want people to enjoy themselves at these events. I think there still can be a lot of frustration, but at least in the Melee community, I've noticed that people are slowly, it's slow, but people are over time getting better at enjoying it more, and that's been really nice to see. And also, to give myself a little credit, I think I've been able to put out messages out there to encourage people in that direction, and hearing that I can make that impact has been really fulfilling to me personally in this time.
Wow, what a detailed answer. Yeah. I mean,
I'm very passionate.
Yeah, of all the top Smash players, especially back in your prime, you were the proponent the most of these psychological and out-of-game aspects, I think, and how they impact your tournament performance. I think that you used to say that you actually practiced for a pretty short amount of time per day compared to other players as well.
Yeah. And it's not because I thought that, the game stuff mattered less. It's I started realizing that, if I exercised well and I meditated well, I could actually get as much value, if not more, from the time I did practice than if I just spent all that time practicing. And I also recognized that I was also getting extra benefits if I spent a little bit of time to socialize every day. Like I consciously blocked out some time, and I could, make it flexible, obviously. But I'd block out, some time at some point in the day, and I'd say, okay, I want to spend some time with people. I need to laugh. I need to be surprised by things. I need to see how other people are thinking about things. I need to enjoy my time with people, build experience. And just keep my mind away from like gaming, or like even like trying to learn things, and just have fun. And I noticed that, obviously that was also helpful. And so just when I recognized, and this was sort of something, you mentioned earlier about Bruce Lee, I sort of started getting this idea from, how he talked about the interconnectedness of everything. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be connected to other people, and I need to, and there are these parts of me that I enjoy expressing and experiencing. So rather than trying to hold back from that, what if I went out into it? And so, I started looking at improving at Melee, not about the game, but about being a better person and expressing more of myself more honestly. And I found that to be really fulfilling, and it also improved my game. So, I felt good about it. It felt like a really healthy approach that I think worked.
Absolutely. And the mental game is so important. And even in a game like Pokemon or even League of Legends or games without the in-person element that Smash has, this out-of-game stuff has such an impact. And having a balanced lifestyle outside of just grinding the game all the time is very important. And you'll find that like your brain will do a lot of work for you if you just let it. Like your subconscious mind kind of processes everything. And
not just even your mind, your body will, your emotions will. Something I noticed as I was going even deeper into myself, like you said, the psychological side. I was trying to explore these deeper blocks that I might have had, habits that I might have picked up on, pains I might have been holding since I was very young. I would notice if I would interact with these things and remove them, that I would be more flexible in my thinking regarding Melee. I would be more free. I would be observing the game more honestly than if I had these restraints on. So it really was so much a process of getting out of my own way in a sense, and just allowing Melee to come into me in its purest form, to say it another way.
I do remember after the Metagame documentary came out, which brought to light your fondness for the Bruce Lee book and all these things. I do remember you saying that like people should be wary if they choose to read the book, because
Yeah.
you said it might like teach them the wrong lessons or lead them down a strange path where maybe they focus too much on the mental game aspect at the expense of other things, because it is a
Yes.
balance.
Yes.
Even though mental game is very important, do you think it's possible to maybe focus on it too much? And how have you personally balanced this and applied lessons from wisdom like, Tao of Jeet Kune Do and other things properly?
I have been lucky in that I did not start really working on these things until I was already a top player in Melee. I think, and I was fortunate enough to have a good enough mental game to get me there, and a good enough, I guess, physical game to get me there. What I have noticed is when I recommended this book to two different people, and then even kind of a couple past that, what I noticed would happen is they would get really caught up on some concepts of movement, and they would get really caught up in like these lofty ideas and turning over these ideas and saying things and softer than softness, these Zen koans and things, things of that nature, which are deep and are profound and are interesting. But I felt that there was no longer a blending of Melee and these esoteric ideas, or Melee and reaching for more for yourself. It was instead Melee's over here, and then there's this deep stuff, philosophical stuff over here, and you're in two different places. And I felt that it seemed difficult to get people to bring those things together. So my caution has always been, if you're gonna read the book, I recommend doing so primarily for the philosophy, and try not to look at the fighting stuff. Now, because that was my problem. But there is also this aspect, and I noticed this too when I recommend people the inner game of tennis, where people started thinking they were a very good teacher and they understood exactly how people would learn, and there's a lot of variance in how people can learn still, even though I think the inner game of tennis does cover a lot of important stuff, don't get me wrong. And so I think there's this tendency to say, okay, well, whatever this thing I read is, that's what the world is, or that's all there is. And what I think Bruce Lee was really trying to do with the book was to give you a jumping off point to learn more. I mean, in fact, to quote him himself, which is possibly ironic, but I'll do it anyway. To quote him himself, he says, "Read what you can, learn the book, use the book, and then when you have used it and learned from it, use it as a rag, use it to clean up the floor, because it no longer serves you." And his point was to not have over reverence for this. His point was to say, use it, use what serves you, use what's useful, and then let it go. To just treat it as another avenue of growth. Now, what he did was really interesting, because he tried to say these things in all these different ways, but there is still, I think, because of his mythology, because of the way he still presented things, because of some of these deep koans he used, there's still this profound sense of some of the things he wrote, which I think, is worth respecting. But he was also saying, make sure that you're balancing that. And so really my sense is just to make sure that not to have, like, I think having wonder about the world, having appreciation for things, expanding your mind, thinking about the beauty of things is all great, and I love it. And that goes for the psychological side, that goes for the philosophical side, excuse me, and that goes for the Melee side. But I think just making sure that how do we bring those together? Ask yourself a question, how do we bring this together? Try to make it practical too. Like, there's that out there, there's that always thinking how to make it more, and that's great. But also try to bring it down to earth sometimes too. How do we bring this together? Because I think that's just the question that we need to be asking ourselves more. And if we're doing that, then I think, you really can't be going wrong. And I could say more, because I didn't exactly answer the question you asked. You asked more about the mental side, but that seems, I think I would probably end with that question anyway. So I hope you can forgive me.
That was a great answer. I think, we're all absorbing influences and knowledge from different places and growing in our own ways. And maybe for you, you found this book and it was like this piece of the puzzle that fit everything together for you. Because you're grinding Melee and that you were facing these challenges, and then you found this wisdom from this book, and it maybe helped you significantly. But you recommend the book to someone else, they're on a different journey, and maybe there's a different certain order of things that has to come first that you have to understand.
And it doesn't mean it wouldn't be helpful. It just means it might be different.
Yeah. It's not like there's a one size fits all solution for these things. So
Yeah.
you got to, I think, as a teacher, if you're trying to help someone, you got to have empathy for them, put yourself in their shoes.
And that's one of the interesting things about, when you have a platform, like, I'm sure you're aware of this. When you say, oh, in Pokemon, it is good to do X, like whatever it is, it's good to use this Pokemon. It's good to use this strategy. It's good to switch in this situation, or whatever. There are going to be a lot of people that are going to, well, what about this? Or, well, this hasn't been my experience. Or, when I
For
play the
sure, yeah.
game, I'm doing this, right? And these are things that you would like never consider, or you'd be like, oh, that's such a strange thing that they're considering it this way. And this might not even be that uncommon. It might be things that like seem pretty true, especially maybe for like certain levels of players, but then you get out there and there's like all kinds of players. And these are people that maybe if like they just need a different way of being approached, that they could become high level players themselves, but it's just they don't maybe think about things the way everyone else does. And so, that's just one of the things about when you have this message that goes out to so many people. It's, I think, impossible to have it be something that's going to reach everyone in a way that makes sense to them. But what you try to do is, you try to do interviews like this, or you try to put out messages that say, okay, this is what I said. I stand by that. I don't disagree, but here's the nuance. And I think that's as long as you're doing your due diligence, what else can you ask for?
Yeah, everyone sort of learns in their own way, but there's always like conventional wisdom. For
Yeah.
Pokemon, the advice I generally give is like learn the fundamentals first,
Yeah.
use the meta stuff. It's like Melee. I think it's similar advice. Don't main Ness and go to your first taunt. Maybe you really want to, but the general wisdom is like play Marth or something first. Learn the fundamentals. Get some experience under your belt. Get used to the tournament environment. And then you can sort of tackle the deeper stuff. You don't want to dive into the deep end right away, I guess.
Sure. I mean, I would say I don't actually have anything against anyone using Nest. For the 5 Nest mains out there, I'm not your enemy. I would say though, if there are people that do ask me, is it okay if I mail low tier? And I say it's fine, but I recommend you also play these other high tiers so that you know how they work and you make sure you are building a full set of melee skills. So I roughly agree with you. Just making sure that you do learn all the fundamentals, right? Is what you were saying.
Yeah. In Pokemon, there's a lot of that where people want to use their favorite guy and he's just not good.
Mm,
It happens way more than Melee, probably. So I got to remind people,
that's
like,
tough.
use Skarmory. Just use Skarmory. Don't get cute.
Man, it sure is weird how many people want to play Vaporeon in Pokemon, am I right?
Uh-huh.
All right, moving on.
I wanted to circle back to something you said before, where like when you have a certain amount of status and become a known entity in the community, that can affect
Mm,
like how you play. And we
yeah.
got a question from a viewer that sort of related to that, called Magic Ice, asked, how do you feel your status as a god of Smash impacted your enjoyment of Melee?
Yeah, that I hated that term at first. I,
Hmm.
I was like, I'm not better than anyone else. Anyone can do what I did. I do not like this separation idea. But I think in the past, I would say, probably around 3 or so years, I've come around on it, and I've recognized that it's not about being seen necessarily as more than. I think there is that going to be that kind of attachment, but I also think it's a way to celebrate the players that gave a lot to the game in a time where, I think a lot of people didn't, and really created a real name and legends for themselves. And I think there is something special about that group that is outside of even that, which is not really something I like talking about so much, just because I think it, can ruffle some feathers. But I think, regardless of all that, I think it's nice to be celebrated. It's nice to know that there is that appreciation, this label that I have for what I've done, and I think in a way continue to do for Melee that can't be taken away from me. And I like that there is this mysticism that is in Melee. There is this elevation of players. There is this reverence for creating such beautiful art in the game. And so I've really come around on it, and I've started to like it a lot more. And I think, this term started with the Evo 2013 donation drive. And I think especially when you consider it in that context, I think, having the gods exist or having that name exist really helped get Melee into where it is today to become more than grassroots, or at least, semi more than grassroots. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And so when I think about that, it's humbling in a way that I was able to contribute to Melee, which has given me so much and still continues to give me so much, and also allowed it to done my part to allow it to grow to where it is now.
Yeah, you can look at it from both angles where it is kind of weird to put players on a pedestal and call them gods. But it's, in the other sense, it's just an awesome storyline. And it gives this community this like anime level
Yes.
mystique and grandeur of
Yeah.
like, these are the guys at the gods. They're the elite. You can't beat
It's
them.
so sick.
And
It's so sick.
that's what made it so compelling when I was getting into it. Like, and
Right.
of all the gods, you were kind of like the mysterious one. I always thought, because I think when I was
Yeah.
first getting into Melee, you were on a hiatus, and everyone like talked about you with this reverence, but I hadn't really seen you play that much except in older videos. And then you
Yeah.
came back for Apex 2015 and won the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that was this an awesome moment of like the god coming back.
Yeah, there was that period of from MLG 2014 through Apex where, Big House happened and other things happened, and I just wasn't there. I was, taking some time, and I was retooling my work with the game. I was retooling work with myself, and I felt that that was a really important time for me. But the game was changing so much in that time. That game, the metagame changed so much that year. And so for me to take those 6 months off, people were like, wow, is he really going to be able to keep up with anything? And but there were also maybe some people on the other end that felt the way your friends did. And so you know I I've always I've not tried to be mysterious. I think I am someone that is not particularly suited to being an entertainer or trying to be in the spotlight or trying to be famous. I am a guy, now that I have felt it, there are aspects of it I really like. I really like being able to connect with a lot of people. I really like being able to share the ideas and the lessons I've learned. I like being able to what I believe is positively influence people's lives. I like being able to do that and feeling that from other people, knowing that I have done that, hearing their experiences is always absolutely beautiful and humbling every single time. So I really like that aspect of it. But being front and center all the time is something that when Melee really blew up to the level it still is, I don't think I was fully prepared for it, and I think some of the work that I've been doing the last several years is to acclimate to that, is to know that, I am worth being perceived by all these people and being appreciated by them, and it's okay to, be in that spotlight and to really enjoy it.
I guess it's weird when like the scene you're part of is reliant on all these storylines and labeling players in a certain way, but at the end of the day you're just like a guy and you didn't necessarily ask to be labeled that way.
Yeah, but I also think, we all have so much we can give, and we all have so much power and beauty and awesomeness and intelligence and everything inside of us. And I think, Melee and its push reflects that, and the passion of the players. So I think I'm very lucky that this opportunity is still there. And that it was there in the first place in the past, and it's still there now. And I really like that. I think it's been very good for me, and I think it will serve me well going forward in my life, and even my life past Melee, which is its own very separate topic. But that's not something I'm working especially towards right now. Most of the focus is towards coming back to Melee tournaments.
What a nice answer. And I do remember recently there was a clip that I thought was really cool where on Slippy you matched up against Hungrybox and you were using
Oh
a alias,
no!
and he recognized you
Oh,
just based on the gameplay. He was like, "This is
that is
Kevin,"
true.
and
Yeah.
I got this flashback to the Gods era, and I was like, "This is so cool that he recognizes you." It says a lot about the skill expression in Melee that he could
Yes.
identify it was you. Do you feel like there's a special kinship between you and the other gods where you know each other on this deep level?
And this didn't get clipped, I don't think, but after I finished playing HBox, it just felt, because he's gone through his Clutch God era, he's gone through an era past that now, and maybe even one, he's in another one currently. But it really still felt like, and I said this in my stream after I played him, it really felt like connecting with an old friend. And I don't know HBox like that personally. We don't talk or anything like that. But it just that familiar way that he played the game. I was like, oh, this is so comfortable. It's like going back in time. It's like working through these mix-ups and just the timings and just it was just there was just something so right about it. It was just so I don't even know if I have the right words for it, but it just felt like home. Like, oh, these are this is kind of like if I think about what Melee is, like that feeling is a big part of it. Like this is what Melee is, like these types of mix-ups. And he was doing good stuff and all that sort of stuff. And of course he had changed some. His DI was better, and other things like that. But it still felt like it was still largely him, and I like that a lot. That was I don't know, that was really nice. That was a good experience for me, I think, regardless of outcome. And yeah, it was funny to hear his reaction to that, and I think he actually did know it was me. But I always think it's kind of funny because sometimes HBox has said that people have played like me and they haven't played like me at all, I think. But
Ah,
I think in this case he was a lot more. I think he was a lot more serious about it. I think he knew like pretty much straight away that it was me. So I'm not really discrediting him or anything like that or your point. But I just thought it would feel disingenuous to me to not say it. But I think
right.
he sometimes HBox content man would just say it. But I think HBox like the player said that in that instance when he played me, and so I also maybe that's another thing. Shout outs to the players that have adapted to the modern era and been able to be successful in content, such as Hungrybox or Mango or Plup or whoever, right? Moki is another example. Um, these players that recognize that Melee is more than just playing the game or even just going to tournaments and just being good now. These people that can be successful in a variety of ways and can contribute to the community and do so much. And I really respect being able to do that. That's really impressive.
That's so awesome. I love that. We've got a viewer question relevant to
Hmm.
that, actually, from Zabamaru1000, who asked, what is your opinion on Mango and Hungrybox and their ability to keep up with the new generation of top players that have taken over? And how do you think U Armada and Mewtwo King would fare with the current competition?
Um, what do I think about Mango and Hungrybox being able to keep up? Okay. I think Mango and Hungrybox being able to keep up shows that there are things that just work. Mango will sometimes hit Zane with a fade back nair on shield into forward smash, and he started doing that in 2008, 2009, when every Marth would fall for it. 15 years later, it still works sometimes.
Yeah, there you go.
No other Falco does that, by the way, still, because we've all gotten it beaten out of him. But Mango, he'll still do it sometimes, and he'll still get Zane with it, which I don't know, mighty impressive, I think. And Mango himself has gone on record to say, yeah, I mean, he says I'm not the most technical, I and everything like that, but it's just about good positioning, good decision making. And the same with Hungrybox. I don't think he innovates the most new puff tech. In fact, he often learns from lower ranked puffs or unranked puffs, other things that he can do. But he puts himself in good positions. He knows how a lot of players play, and he has that experience. And so I think there is something about, and you'll see this in other fighting games too. This isn't Melee exclusive about the older players that just have all that knowledge that can just make these beautiful openings happen. I think there's I saw a funny, this is about Street Fighter, so this is going to be about like two people in your audience that are going to understand what I'm about to say, but I think it's funny, so I'm going to say it to you anyway. There was a funny I think tweet I saw where someone said, yeah, there's this guy at your local that's going to talk about like all these mix-ups and frame advantage, and they're really intimidating, but that guy's going to lose to the 35-year-old dude that doesn't know anything but calls Ryu Rue and knows about footsies. And I
Right,
and
yeah.
because in Street Fighter 2 they called him Rue, everyone called him Rue. And it was just all neutral game. It was all out plays. It was all that stuff because you didn't have like meter, you didn't have all this other stuff, and you only had so many openings before a kill happened or someone was in the corner or whatever. So I think in the same way, there was that focus one way in the past, and there's this maybe a different focus now. And it's not to say one way is better or worse either, by the way, because I think when we look at players, modern players like Cody, who have a just enormously different take on Fox and optimizing all of these aspects, in particular his recovery, which used to be the Mango thing for so long, but now his recovery is even better than Mango's. And just optimizing all these things, really breaking it down and just doing neutral his own way. That's just really effective, really efficient, and converts into this monstrous punish game. There's clearly something to that, right? There's a reason Cody is so successful and so different from Mango's Fox or Moki's Fox or whatever. But these players that have been doing it so long, they also understand, hey, maybe you don't need so many inputs to get this opening. Maybe you can do a simpler edgeguard mix-up that doesn't wear you out and doesn't overly complicate things. And there's a real value to that, not just in tournament or like over the course of a tournament, but also just, like removing agency from your opponent. Like, okay, maybe they're not doing a multi-layered mix-up, but maybe it's a 50-50. At the end of the day, that's still a mix-up, right? You still got to deal with it. And maybe they know how to influence you, so it like is not a true 50-50, but it's like a fuzzy one, right? Like, okay, well, it's a 50-50, but maybe they moved a little early. Does that mean they move forward? Does that mean they're going to attack, or maybe that's like a fake? And there's a lot of those elements to it. So I think so. Basically, I think those players, make that work, and that's sort of my same answer for the other three, myself, Armada, and M2K. I think we have all of these things that we still know. We have this great framework on the game, and I think also actually we've been all at the top. We've all been number one, and I think having that high standard, having that standard of excellence, is also really important. Because if you haven't been number one in something in the world, especially with a lot of competition, I think it can be really difficult to imagine yourself there. But if you've done that, then it no longer, it's like, okay, well, I've already done it. I just need to do it again. And it no longer is that daunting, like that seemingly impossible or like weird to think about or whatever that's like. And so I think having that high standard and also having that great framework for the game, that understanding, is really going to make it so people can still achieve in that way. Now, there's a separate question about motivation. So this is a separate topic. This is not about like, oh, do they understand the game enough? Could they do it if they wanted? The question is, will they want to?
Right, yeah.
And your Armada said he would come back if there was $1 million prize pool and whatever. And do I believe him? I don't know at this point. But the point is, you remember when I was saying before, the interconnectedness of things, this emotional aspect, that all of this. If they don't want it like before, that's the difference. And I mean, I still want it, but I just have other things to do first. But in the case, but I think M2K's case is complicated. I won't really speak for him. And Armada's case is uncomplicated. He said, I don't want to. so
Yeah.
so while I think Armada certainly could do it, and I think even years after he stopped and like wasn't playing Melee at all except for the occasional teams match, he was still competitive with Cody for a while. He was still doing really great against a lot of top 20 players. That is very clear to me. And this is not like, something that was recorded. This was people who were talking about this at the time. This was tweets at the time. So if you don't know this, I understand, but you're not going to find a recording of it. But that is the case. That is the case that I think Armada certainly has the easiest case in terms of like, well, he did play past that and this is what he did. But I think this would be true for me and M2K too. But I think motivation is a big part for those other two, at least to some extent. And for me, it's a different thing. But that's a whole wonky thing. And basically, we're still working to get there.
What a great answer. I suppose that hitting number one does give you a lot of confidence in yourself, but it's also it might be a bad thing because you've already done it. So like, why do you?
And that is the other side. That is the other. Yep. And so that was Armada's thing. Is he said, I got number one. I got number one again. I got number one again. Why am I still playing? That was it.
Yeah, he more than proved himself. So what is the
why
reason to keep playing? Yeah.
He got number one. And then I guess he held it for a year, and then he stopped, and then Evo 2013 happened, so he came back, and then he got number one like 3 times or whatever, and then he said, okay, well, I'm good. I already left and came back, and then I did it again. Why do I need to do it again? Why am I doing this? I'm just forcing myself for a year at this point. I don't care. And I think the same thing's true with M2K, where I think, after 2007, where I think a lot of people joke about, him and the way he talks about it, but I think for him, I think that probably was his peak. I think that was when he was at, at his best, and I think, that was when people like Mango were still coming up, and like it was just like kind of a done deal when M2K was at a tournament. He soloed an entire crew of people by himself with 4 stocks, by the way, and these were not bad players. These were like top 30, top 20 players and a crew. He beat the entire crew by himself when they could counterpick him. That is incredible.
That's epic.
So, you're doing that, and that and when you have that success, it melee, and this is something I discovered after I became number one, is I was like, oh, well, what do I want now? What am I playing for? Because because my goal was always beat the next person, and then our motto was like the last person kind of for me in a way, and so I beat him, and I was like, okay, well, now what? I'm number one. I beat everyone. Now what do I do? And the answer was, I don't know. That was the answer, and it took me a year and a half to start getting new answers, and that's when I started getting into Tao of Jeet Kune Do and in the inner game of tennis, and starting to learn. Okay, well, now it's not about being the best at playing the game. Now it's Now it's about being the best at being myself. But that answer, it took a little while to form. Like I'm paraphrasing a few years. But yeah, so that when, and I think this is a hard thing to understand from the outside looking in, like, oh well, why? Because maybe you'll see like, oh well, there's this athlete that can keep being number one, or like Mike Tyson was number one for so long or whatever, and sure, okay, I mean, in athletics, and it happens, and I'm not, I'm not going to certainly speak for those people. I haven't talked to them about what that might have been like, but they also had sports psychologists and we didn't. And so I think it's just a different situation. I think maybe not having that physical backup, physical bolster of your body being able to buffer against that, or to make it easier to think of new ways of being, may be an issue. I don't know, just one thing to think about. But yeah, it is absolutely something that messes people up, and you don't need, this is important, you don't need to hit number one in the world to have this happen, but it's most easiest to see. So you can watch when a player gets sponsored, watch what happens in the next tournament. Almost always they get upset or they bust her out or whatever. And it's not because it's not because they're necessarily even nervous, but it's just because I finally got sponsored after years of grinding.
And
And your
then
body's just kind of like, ugh. And so there's that new level that you need to start getting acclimated to. Similarly, you can get ranked number one in your state, or number one in your city, or number one in your backyard. Whatever. There's some level, right, where people get satisfied, and this has been my thing that I don't think still gets talked about enough. Is being satisfied will absolutely ruin you if you don't recognize it. And it's so sneaky. You can even tell yourself, no, I know about it. It's not going to happen. And you can still do it. You have to be so on the lookout to keep this from happening. And that is something that I think really requires great awareness, people checking you to make sure that you're really on the ball with this, and all of that sort of stuff. Because when you're competing, anytime you take the edge off, that is something huge that your opponents can exploit.
that balance is so interesting. And for you, you said, I mean, after hitting number one, you continued to perform at a high level. And is that because you accepted, like, you had this understanding of your relationship to the game and what you wanted out of it? And it wasn't necessarily to reach a certain goal anymore. It was like just to be as good as you can or something. Or you said express yourself.
Yeah. So my results dipped for a couple years actually after I hit number one. I was starting to I got upset by a couple people, most notably a Fox player from Mexico named Javi, and I think you show footage from things while we're talking. You could show the end of that set with me doing the most I'll ever do to throw a controller, which is not a real throw. I just kind of flipped it lightly out of my hand, but still, it would have been better if I didn't do that. And so I was, a little peeved about it, as you might expect. This was one of the gods of the game, losing to someone that wasn't really that well known or ranked or anything. And he's a great player, don't get me wrong, but this was still, a big upset and a very big deal at the time because the gods didn't really lose to many people, like you said. So I didn't perform at quite the same level for a while, but I eventually, really became, once I really started settling into it, because I didn't know entirely why I played. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to, I read the inner game of tennis more. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I want to start playing more well, actually, I started playing for a while. I read Tao of Jeet Kune Do first. It's coming back to me now. And I was like, okay, I'm going to play to explore the game. this isn't about winning and losing. This is about exploring the game. I still want to push myself, but I didn't have that, like, I have to win type of drive. I didn't have that back. So this is about exploring the game. But then when I read the inner game of tennis, there was a section in the back about like motivations to play, and I find that section to be absolutely wonderful. And there was a section about, motivations that are healthier, and there was one about fun, and it sounds so cliche, like, oh, if you have fun, you won, haha. This is what we say to 5-year-olds, but we don't believe it because we're adults. But if you actually really take the time and you get past your cynicism and all the stuff that you've been through in your life, and you really, really try to open your heart and connect to this, like, this is what it's about. It's about having fun. It's about exploring what Melee is about. It's about learning and growing more, being more than you can be. And I recognized when I read that, I felt a beat in my heart, like a deeper heartbeat, like a fast, but not like anxious, like a beautiful, full heartbeat. And I had a feeling that I hadn't felt in years. I had a feeling that I felt when I was trying to go to my first tournament, and I was like, this game is so beautiful. There's so much to learn. There's so much out there. Anyone could be out there. I didn't know anything about these players I could be playing against. What are they like? What's it like? And there was just so much possibility, and it was so much excitement, so much unknown, but so much, like, I just want to experience it all. And I felt that again. And that is how I knew that I was on the right track, because I felt it. And so when I tell people, and especially when I work with people when I coach or something like that, I try to get people in the mindset of, does this feel right? Because if it doesn't, you are wasting your time. You are wasting your time if it doesn't feel right. So really, like, yes, there are all these ideas and there's all these things, but at the end of the day, it's even more basic than that, I think. And when we return to, the way we think about, like, oh, have fun, talk to a 5-year-old. A 5-year-old knows when something's fun, right? It's very obvious. They're dancing, they're having fun, they're laughing, whatever, and they just feel it fully and completely. They allow it to fill their whole body, and it's wonderful. In the same way, we need to learn that. We need to go back to that. We need to allow that for ourselves, be filled with that ourselves, and share that with the game that is trying to give it to us. And we just need to allow that in. And I think when we do that, even just for a moment, so many beautiful things can happen. This is why people love flow state experiences so much, because those are rare moments where we give ourselves over to that, where we get out of our own way, we get out of our own head, and we start just experiencing the moment completely. We start experiencing, like, you, this person, all of that. But there's no thought. It just is. And it's so wonderful, and it's beyond words, but that is my way of trying to encourage people to feel that, because I think it's so beautiful and everyone deserves it.
That's a beautiful response. I love that.
Thank you.
That's where the philosophy comes in, the Zen idea of, like, being present and just enjoying the moment and all that. And
Yeah.
when you're new to something, when it's like a whole new world, you get the butterflies in your stomach, and you just want to explore all these mechanics and all these things, and you lose that at a point. You, like, plateau. Like, you're sort of at an average level. It kind of happened to me at Melee, where I lost the magic. I mean, lost the discovery.
Yeah, there's people that start telling you, oh, you're getting good, or oh, I'm good enough at this thing now, or oh, I'm starting to challenge these people, or oh, I'm starting to beat these people, and the satisfaction comes in. Or there's these judgments that start coming in, like, oh, I am quote unquote good enough, or maybe like, oh, this person is still giving me a hard time. I am quote unquote not good enough. And then there's all of this, and but when you start getting to a certain level, and again, this happens early, and there starts to be layers of this, and you have to be so on top of it to catch it. But again, it is so worth it. It is so worth it to keep that joy alive, and find other people that can feel that too, or at least maintain it for yourself in such a way where the way other people act doesn't influence it. Because it's so important, and you owe it to yourself. And this is not like, look, if you listen to this and you're like, okay, well, I don't play Melee or Pokemon, I don't even know why I'm here, this is on my YouTube recommended, and somehow I'm listening this far in, okay, whatever, right? This is something that, like, learning how to be your best self works in your job, works with your family, works with you being nicer to your dog, right? This is an everything thing that I'm talking about here, being satisfied, being, feeling good enough or not good enough or whatever, right? These are things that are just like like 99.9% of people will feel and experience and need to connect with. I mean, maybe they understand it differently, but that's just my way of explaining it. That's worked pretty well. And so I really do encourage, even if this example doesn't work quite right, try to tweak it around to work well for you, because I feel very strongly about this, and I really want people to live their best lives.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff is fundamental. And
Yeah.
like you've taken inspiration from a book about tennis and a book about
Yeah.
martial arts, which
Yes.
are not
Yes.
what you're doing, but the lessons still
Yes.
apply. That's the
Yeah.
best source of wisdom, is like looking elsewhere at
Yeah.
these universal concepts.
Yeah. I'd eventually, I really, this is something that I've not told many people, but I really eventually want to start learning from nature more. And I don't even mean like a book or anything like that. Like going out, maybe going on a trail or something and looking at how ants move or bees behave or animals interact with each other, how squirrels climb trees or something, and taking inspiration from that in a lot of ways, which include melee, I think, if I happen to see, a squirrel come by, and how does it react when I get in a certain space? That's a melee thing. How does it act? How does it move? Does it zigzag? Does it cut one way? And I think, there is that aspect of it, which again sounds maybe silly, but I think there is something about, the instinctual in the momentness of the way animals move that I think can be really, really useful. And in the same way, I think there are, lots of beautiful things about nature anyway, even outside of that, that can be very healing for someone. And let's face it, if we're we're inside all the time, it helps to have some balance, which is another word you've used a lot, which I agree with, to be outside and to carry that with us if we are going to be playing inside, and to keep that grander outer awareness, because I think when we're inside we have this more insular feeling, right? And so I think knowing that there's like more going on, and then to be able to you know know that things are going to be okay, there's a lot happening, I think can be really helpful.
What's funny is about the nature thing. I remember watching this National Geographic thing about like the mongoose versus the cobra. They have like this rivalry, and they're
Okay.
like
Oh, they do.
perfectly
Yeah.
they're like perfectly matched for one another, and they're like even.
Yes.
It's like an even matchup
Yes.
because
Okay. Nice.
the cobra is like pretty slow, but it can, I don't know if it's a cobra or some other snake, but he can one hit the mongoose basically. But the mongoose is fast and has like movement. And I was like, this is
Mm.
just fox versus moth in nature. This is epic.
You're right. Yeah. And what can we learn about the rivalry? And what can we learn about the people? This is oh great. I'm on a Pokemon channel. So this is like the Billion Lions versus the Pokemon, right? What can we learn about the people that take one side versus the other, right? Because this is even like, this is how we learn about how people view the world, and how do we understand like the way people, interact with things. Like what are the Mongoose fans? Like what are their main arguments for the Mongoose, or the Cobra fans? What are they thinking like the Cobra's main strengths are? Do the people on the Cobra side have more qualities in common, and what can we learn from each other? Or like how do you take the best from both and try to apply it to yourself, right? There's like all these fun ways that you can look at like this really cool thing and apply it to melee, or to people, or yourself, or your society, or whatever, right? Or just another joke you have, like the Pokemon and the Lions thing. Like, I think it's all fun. And I think, the more that we explore the relationships of things, the more we learn, the more we grow, the more we open our mind. I mean, something I've really honed in on, I think, the past several years, is to not look at things, not assume that like there's one way to look at everything, but to say there's always multiple perspectives. There's always another angle. There's always, more to be learned, but to really keep that openness, I think, is something that I've only really learned in the past, few years. But I think it's just been so wonderful and so healthy and so nice, because now I don't feel like I have, a confidence that's going to be shattered when I like learn something new, or I meet like a different, very informed person or something like that. I go, okay, well, tell me about this. Let me see if I can incorporate this, and that's been really nice.
What was that Billion Lions versus Pokemon matchup again? I've seen discourse about that.
What?
I've
You
seen it.
you never talked to anyone? Hey, listen, if you're this far into the interview, listen, this is for you. I don't know who this is for, but I guess if you're this far in, hey, hit that like and subscribe button, will you? But the Billion Lions versus the one of every Pokemon is an argument that I don't know. It's several years old.
One of every
And
Pokemon is what it is. Okay.
yes, one of every Pokemon, and it's come back up again very recently. I think in the past couple weeks, the arguments restarted. I've seen it a lot on Twitter, but it's come up periodically, and it's a very fun argument because First of all, we get to say, well, 1 billion is a really big number, and and the lions will work together to form a lion ladder, which is very, very funny. Which is why I always take the position of the lions. But then the people on the Pokemon side are often very serious, and they say, well, Mad Cargo is hotter than the sun, and Arceus is God, and whatever. And then the Lions people will say, okay, well, your lore is inconsistent. If you're going to use, some of the lore from like the games, then like they also have power points, but they're gonna have to start struggling because they can't wipe out all the lions in one shot, and the lions are gonna have HP. And what's a comparable
You
lion
think about a
Pokemon?
Pokemon like Mewtwo, he has human intelligence, so that's a huge advantage. The lions are just wild animals. They're not going to coordinate.
Right, but if you think about it, if we imagine, monkeys typing on a typewriter for infinity, they would eventually
Yeah,
create Shakespeare.
there's enough lions that.
But there's so many lions that they would accidentally or perhaps unconsciously stumble onto some winning strategies, much like if they made a good move in chess. So I think that the lions can at least match the intelligence of the Pokemon, if not succeeded.
If you reckon it's like it's Pokemon mechanics, like it's 1v1, and then after every lion dies, you send a new lion in, because in that case, the Pokemon carry, because one of them just boosts up, and then they just sweep all the lions. It would take ages, but they would get him. I'm assuming it's like an all-out brawl where it's not 1v1. It's all lions against all Pokemon at once.
That's an interesting question, right? If it is all 1v1s, are we assuming the game mechanics? Because if we do, then they run out of power points. They have to start struggling, and so then the Pokemon would faint first.
That's
right?
okay. That's actually damn true. You actually owned me there. That's damn true.
So we have to make sure we have our lore consistent when we do this. It's such a fun argument. I don't even care about winning the argument. I don't care, because even if I win anyway, but it's just fun to go over the perspectives. And I think it's such a silly, but good enough argument. It's like barely good enough to where it's like fun on both sides. But I just like how differently they argue, because it's basically like, who would win, Jello or Santa Claus? It's like you just have to argue so differently. You have to argue so differently, for both sides, and I think that is so fun.
Well, that's a lot of lions versus Mewtwo, because Nasty Plot and Substitute. You get activating a berry, which would subsequently.
No, not dude. Okay, but they have berries in the wild. Hey, listen, I'm saying they got berries in the wild, man.
Yeah, that's.
No, I love it. I love it a lot. No, I like that the competitive element too that you brought in. I need to see, you got me out of my depth a little bit there. I know about the berries. I know that you can act. I know that some of them will speed you up or make you stronger or heal you and all that sort of stuff. But I would need to be more informed. I need to refresher on some of the moves like Nasty Plot and all that to really get in there. Maybe the lions cook up a Nasty Plot. I don't know. I don't know how I would work it yet, but that is fun. I like that a lot.
I think the lions probably got it the more I think about it, but I don't know. There could be some
your comments might be nothing but Pokemon lines. I hope your comments are nothing but Pokemon versus the lions. Dude, it's like this is like the pineapple pizza debate, but for nerds. It is so funny.
You got to consider as well that lions are a pretty good animal. Like one lion is better than like a lot of Pokemon. There's a lot of garbage Pokemon, like Pidgey, Bibarel. Toasted by a single lion,
There's no way the Pokemon YouTuber is on the side of the lions. This is so funny.
It is a lot of lions.
Okay. Now, consider that Gust is like this giant whirlwind that Pidgey can use, right? Giant whirlwind blows away so many lions.
That's 40 base power.
Maybe topples the lion ladder even. We've seen it in the anime. Just we've seen Pidgeys, Pidgeotos, being able to create just hurricane force winds. That's gonna at least slow down the lions, and the Pidgeys are gonna be in the air. What are the lions gonna do, right?
Well, you can use a lion adjacent Pokemon as like a reference. Like Persian is it's like a cat. It's got Slash. We could assume a lion also gets Slash, and maybe is a normal type. You just slash the Pidgey. It's got no defense.
I love you. You are making me so happy the more you do this. I am so thrilled, because the more you do this, the more upset Pokemon fans are going to be.
I love upset. You don't know. Even I'm a Pokemon YouTuber, but Pokemon fans can be damn annoying. Especially about pronunciation and little nitpicks.
This conversation might get clipped, and you're gonna get so much engagement. This is so funny.
I love the Pokemon community, obviously, but some of you guys
Yeah.
are damn annoying.
Oh man, that's rich. I love that so much. Well, you know what? I don't want to oversaturate you on this, and I don't know what other questions you might have.
Yeah,
Like as much as fun as it would
we
be to
should
keep going
circle
with
back
this.
to
Yeah,
Melee.
yeah,
And
yeah.
don't
I really want to. I'm so excited to read the
you
comments
got
on this video
you got
now.
3 more hours to no no. Circling back
Oh man.
to what you said about like different kinds of player that achieve greatness. Armada had his period of dominance. Mewtwo King was
Yes,
number one. PP
yes,
Mango.
yes.
We got a question from DK Kerber, who asked, "Who do you consider the greatest player of all time?" It's a question with many
Oh,
answers.
oh,
There's
we went from such a fun topic to such a miserable one so fast.
oh
What a
no.
shame. When you talk about fans being difficult to work with sometimes, this has got to be,
Is this a very divisive one, right? Yeah.
this might be my least favorite thing to talk about related to Melee ever. Now that
Wow.
maybe that's like a personal issue on my part. Maybe I need to make peace with that, right? And this is not like an ego thing either. Like I would honestly probably hate it more if I was discussed more in this, but thankfully, honestly, probably thankfully I'm not. But okay, so I will
I'm not that good at
like
Melee, but I've got a vibes-based answer. I feel like it's Mango, just because he's got the longevity.
sure. And I think that's if you ask the majority of if you ask the majority of the players, I think that's who they would say. I think the three answers really people give are Mango, Armada, and Hungrybox at this point. But I think most people would go Mango right now, and and they're like just to start answering the question, because I feel like when we talk about what is the greatest, I think there's so many presuppositions we make. What does greatest mean? What does it mean? The most amount of tournament wins? Does it mean the longest time that you are a tournament winning threat? Does it mean that when you did win, you were most dominant? Does it mean that there's some hybrid answer of like a long time, really dominant, stuff like that? Does it include mastery with multiple characters? Does it include how you handled yourself outside the game? Does it include how well you appeal to fans? There are, I think, so many factors that people unconsciously and unknowingly use when discussing greatness. But I think this conversation, what it really is not who do I quote unquote objectively think is the greatest of all time, but who do I like the most? That's what I think the question actually is. If you
Right.
the hand on heart, that's what I think the question actually is. Who do I like the most? And this is another way to say, this is my favorite player. That's what this really is from what I've noticed. Because when I really drill down to like what people are really saying, it's like when I watch this player and when they win, it is the sickest thing. And there are some people that will deviate from that a little bit, but usually you don't have people saying, "Oh, well, this player I don't like that much. I gotta admit they're the goat." You don't usually see that. Like it happens sometimes, but you don't see it a lot. And but to go even farther out, I don't think putting one person above another is great. I that again, and which maybe sounds weird given how I said the thing about gods, but I also think you could have you had the group of people in the original Sandbox documentary that were hyped up as really great, but I don't think it necessarily made them necessarily like people would talk about how special they were and how great it was to watch them play and maybe how at times they seemed untouchable. But I don't think it was necessarily about, there was never this like, oh, they are clearly just so much better or worth more as a human than other people. Like maybe there was like a little bit of that, but that wasn't really the focus. But now you have so much rankings culture. And it's like, if you didn't win the last tournament, what good
Hmm.
are you? And there's so much like, oh, well, this is your rank. This is what you are now. This is your value. This is your worth. Did you beat someone above you? Then you're worth more. If you lost to someone below you, then you're worth less. Are you ranked in the top 10? Therefore, you're seen as like a really good player. You're worth my attention. If you stream, you're worth my attention. If you are on stream, if you're not, then I don't care. There's like all of that kind of stuff that's just in the community now. And I don't like that stuff. That stuff doesn't feel good. Granted, rankings are healthy for the game to an extent. They help sponsors determine who would be good to sign. A lot of people, it helps them follow narratives. It helps me follow narratives because I forget what happened like 2 weekends ago in events because like we have so many and they all blend together and all that. So it is helpful for me to follow kind of like trends in the games, but I don't think it as like, because sometimes people will slump and like whatever, or sometimes people will focus on the game a little less, or sometimes people are retooling their game and they're actually getting better, but their rank went down, and that the rank doesn't reflect that. Um, and so I don't take someone's number as what they are, but I think so many people do, and I think this is very common, in a spectator sport. And so but I really just don't like this idea of putting people above others, which again was my original issue with the thing of gods. But when I thought about it more, like we could have a word or a way, if it works out or it feels right, to describe the Zane Codys of today, right? We could find some way to talk about them if like they develop their own mythos to a similar extent, we could argue, as the gods did, and I would have no problem with that. But it wouldn't mean that they were better than better, worth more than anyone else. But I think that'd be another way to celebrate them, and I think that'd be good for storylines. So I think we need to be very careful, and I recognize how this sounds given how I talked about things before, and I recognize that there's like this dance here that I maybe am not able to fully articulate, but there's something about just this rankings culture that I just really have found very hard on players, and created a very tough culture from fans, and um just real rough stuff. And then that gets dialed up to 11 when we talk about greatest of all time. And there's just so many things that get hurled around about me or Armada or even people like Ken or Asin from like a long time ago that I think are either like are often very disrespectful. I mean, and kind of in both ways sometimes. And so I think um, it's it's one of the, and there's also this things about comparing eras, which is kind of hard to do, and like kind of like how they comparing the greats in basketball is kind of hard to do because it was different eras. So that's a lot of words to say. This is a just a messy question. It's really a very, very subjective one more than an objective one, in my opinion. Like, most questions, or pretty much any question is, I think. But I'll answer your question and just try to put all that stuff aside anyway. I think it's Armada because I believe he was so dominant at really competitive periods of time. And I think overcoming his desire to not play to come back and succeed anyway, especially with Peach, and then to pick up another character and do it really quickly was incredibly impressive. And I also really like the way he carried himself. So that's my answer to the question. And I guess I sort of felt, well, I won't go into a little anything more than that, but that's my answer to the question. And certainly, I have no hate in my heart for anyone that has a different answer, because hopefully I made it clear. I think fundamentally the question is, not one that I want to spend a lot of time answering, because I think there's so much stuff wrapped up in it. But if I had to answer, that's how I would answer and why.
It's a valid answer, yeah. It's interesting because he retired on his own terms, and like you
Yes.
said, he doesn't have the drive to play anymore. So do you really need to keep forcing yourself to play just to be in this conversation of being the
Yeah, I
goat,
mean,
just to do it?
I mean,
I think
he's
he
just doing
deserves
it
that
for other people.
status.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for, this doesn't mean, that I can't change my mind about, someone like Mango or Hungrybox eventually or anything like that. But this is just sort of how it felt for me playing against everyone, and also kind of watching how things have gone over time. But there's also something to be said for the players like Mango and Hungrybox who, even though they've had at this point more times where their motivation's been lower than Armada's, they've still come back. They bounced back, and that's really impressive. And I don't want to diminish that. I mean, I think all of the gods are remarkable in everything they've done. And what you have to remember when we're talking about this discussion, we are talking about the top 0.000000001% of all competitors ever. Like, these are just absolutely exceptional, tremendous competitors that are really, really, really skilled and phenomenal at what they do. And I think, when there's so much, mudslinging that gets involved in this, I think a lot of that's lost. This is not about downplaying anyone else. This is about, ideally, if you're going to have this conversation, about uplifting one person that you think, deserves maybe
Yeah.
that little extra shine on top of all of that, hopefully.
I mean, yeah, I think it's just Mango embodies melee, and the fact that he's still competing at a high level today is so impressive. I think that
It is.
just in my opinion makes him the greatest. And
Totally valid. Totally valid.
but yeah, Armada had that insane level of dominance. Like I was there for all of it, watching him just win tournaments back to back to back, non-stop, never losing outside of the gods for years. I think was a level of consistency.
Yeah,
they're
remarkable.
pretty close. Like it's not much of a difference.
Yeah, and again, I think it's totally valid to see it the way you do, and I think most people see it the way you do, and I think that's totally fine.
Well, there you go. We won't dwell on that one too much. I think you're absolutely right that it depends on what you value.
Yeah, same with tier lists, same with anything else. What you value.
We got a question from Mutation who asked, is there any moment in your Melee career that really meant everything to you?
Oh, that's a good question. Meant everything to me. Everything.
That's a fun way to phrase that.
Wow. I don't think it was when I won anything. It's probably something that I've...
When you leveled up and re-experienced that passion for the game, reignited it?
Yeah, it might be something like that.
Yeah, because the way you
No,
think of things is not results-based. It's like feelings-based.
Yeah, right. I think I might have two answers to this. I think one is the day I discovered Melee. The day I discovered Melee, I was on YouTube and I was the best among my friends, and I was like, can anyone beat my Mario? I'm gonna look it up. This was when YouTube wasn't that big yet, 2007. And I searched up professional Super Smash Brothers Melee players, and it turned out there were a lot of people that could beat my Mario. And I was so blown away, and I was just so hooked, and I thought that really was everything to me.
Yeah.
To have the answer be yes, and a beautiful yes, and an exciting yes. And I think my second answer is every time I've hit the flow state when I've played someone, because that's everything, but it's also nothing, and that's the point. And I think my third answer would be when I was practicing, not playing other people, but practicing by myself before Apex 2015. I think that is one of the most important times of my career, maybe my life actually, because at that time I had internalized so much of Bruce Lee's work. I had internalized so much of the inner game of tennis. I had a practice routine in and out of the game that I think was fulfilling and nourishing and enriching and giving me so much. And I feel like I was so connected with the game. I felt, and I enjoyed practice more than playing people. I'm going to say that again. I enjoyed practice more than playing people. That's how I knew that what I was doing was special and worth it.
That's so interesting.
And that came from really trying to dive deep into the basics, diving deep into what Melee is and myself, and really trying to connect with that enjoyment. And that is, and in those times when I could really enjoy Melee, and this was not like a rare thing, this was like an everyday thing, but that was probably like a month or so, maybe like December to early January, going from December and then into January of 2015, where I think it was really special. And I think that still has left such an impression on me as what I want out of the game. And not only that, but from the thinking I've been doing, how can I take that further? How can I make, more than everything or everything, like what actually everything is. And I want that.
What a great answer. Not only discovering the game itself, but the preparation that was the foundation of your eventual triumph in Apex.
Yes.
That's a beautiful answer.
Thank you.
We got another question. We got a lot of questions about DK.
So you know what? I'm not shocked.
It's the big story right now. But one of them was from Blues Energy, who is one of the best Pokemon Gen 3 players.
Oh wow.
Who was inspired by the DK thing to experiment in Gen 3, and he actually used Slaking, who's kind of like the DK of Pokemon, and like hit number 1 in the world with it on the ladder, and like went crazy with it in tournaments, went on a real run with Slaking, who everyone thought sucked.
Wow.
Which is very fun.
Well, hey, shout outs to you. That's cool. Would you say the name was Blues Energy?
Blues Energy. Yeah.
Blues Energy.
And yeah, he simply asked, what are your thoughts on the DK Renaissance?
I don't think the DK Renaissance is just limited to DK. I think that's the one that's got the most notoriety and popularity for good reason, but I want to at least shout this out first. There's a Link player, Red X, who did really well against a top 20 player at Genesis. It game 5, I think pretty close to last stock. So really, really competitive. And this Sheik player knows how to play against Link. They played against the Link player a lot. So this was not matchup inexperience. So I think, we're going to see more Links. There are Game and Watch players who all have ridiculous names for whatever reason. I'm an expert on this, so I can clarify. I have investigated. They all have ridiculous names. Walmart shoes, Glock and my Toyota, whatever. I think another one's name is like Bingy or something. That's the most normal name I've ever heard for a Game and Watch player. They're picking up some good wins. This is not isolated to DK. I think more low tiers are going to rise up, but DK players are the ones that either got out in front of it first, or or maybe that character just has the most potential out of all of them. If you're someone that wants to look at it that way, however you want to look at it. But I think DK, I think it's interesting. I think some of this is due to the way the community has changed. In the past, we didn't do what's called labbing very well, where you could like go frame by frame and test things and like really optimize the game and things like that. We didn't have that too much. We had 20XX, and before that, you had to have a golden action replay disc for your GameCube that you could plug in or insert, and then you would be able to go frame by frame in that. But that hardly anyone had one of those. I've seen one once in person, and so I think with the advent of Uncle Punch and that, I think that's part of it. Being able to push characters more that previously may not have been experimented with so easily. And then there's also, of course, Slippy, but notably Slippy ranked, because on unranked everyone quits out on you if you play DK. So yeah, that's what was an issue. So when ranked came out, you couldn't quit out anymore. And so now you had to play against the funny monkey, and that gave the DKs valuable experience, especially over. Actually, I don't know if rank came out over quarantine or not. I don't remember anymore. But regardless, they still were able to play some people at least directly over quarantine, which was helpful. But I think ranked has facilitated that as well. And there are some other things too. But those are some of the things I would shout out. However, I mean, I think the DK players banded together to really work on things. I don't know about other characters. I think it is kind of common for characters to work together these days, but I think DK players really work together and share a lot of tech and innovate and everything like that together. And I think Junebug is a really good representative for them too, having been a top player in PM, and DK being a top character in that game. I think he not only has a high standard for DK, which I mentioned before, remember, but also he has a high standard for himself because he was a top player. So I think he not only knows how to play mix-ups very well against great players, knows how to play Smash very well, but he also, says, okay, well, how do I make this character like the way I saw it in that game? What's going to be successful? And so I think that there's a lot. I think Junebug's case is especially interesting, and I think that's why he's the highest ranked one, at least for now. And so there's a lot of cool stuff that's contributing to DK specifically. And I think it's sort of starting to compound on itself too, because, now there's the documentaries that are coming out about him. And now the DK, there's like 4 DKs in top 40 and 2 in top 30. What the heck? That just came out on the rankings. And which is, if I want to talk about the good side of rankings, this would be it, right? We can really, have a better sense of these trends that are really changing. Like, okay, so maybe there's like 2 DKs in the top 100. They're where and they're what, like that's what I like. That's when I like rankings, is when they can tell stories a little bit better like that. Like obviously, maybe they're not, maybe one of them isn't actually top 40, or one of them, whatever, right? Because maybe the numbers are close, or someone didn't attend enough, or whatever. But I think overall, I think it's really cool to have rankings tell a story like that. And I really like that. I really like that. The DK success seems like it's going to keep compounding. But a word of caution to all of you people thinking DK is going to be a top tier or whatever. A word of caution. It is my view that DK is still benefiting a little bit from the AMSA effect, where people are not fully taking the character fully seriously yet. I think that's starting to change. But in large part, I think the DKs have been labbing and coming up with new things faster than people have been countering or knowing how to play their base game plan against DK well. We may well see some DKs being on the main stage less as time goes on, as people develop accurate countermeasures against DK. maybe we start saying, well, maybe we quit out against DK a little less on our Slippy, or maybe we see on Cody or Zane's stream they're playing against DK a little more. And we're like, well, if they're doing it, maybe we got to do it too. So just, or Mango stream or whoever. So just a word of warning that counterforce may arrive, which doesn't say that the DKs can't do something about that as well, but I think that work is still flowing overall in the direction of the DKs. And so that is my word of caution. So where does this go? Do I think DK will win a major? I'm not really convinced, but I've also I'll, you know what, hand up, hand on heart, I didn't think we'd ever be able to see so many low tiers do as well as we're seeing now. I didn't. I thought, characters were flowcharted too well. I thought too many things were optimized. I did not think it was possible. But as it turns out, being able to lab things is really good for a lot of characters. So I think, we may see an explosion of, more low tiers and especially mid tiers. I think Luigi is another example of a character that could benefit from some more labbing and could take some big names and have some more solid results than what we're seeing now. So, this is not DK exclusive. I think there are a lot of factors influencing it, especially in DK's favor, but will it sustain itself? I think that is hard to say. I think that's one of those time will tell things. We're in the midst of a very interesting period for Melee with that right now, though.
I mean, it's a cool story, and we're all getting caught up in the hype. But the bubble might pop, The DK bubble.
Well, hey, listen, I don't know when this is coming out, but sure, buy DK stock, buy DK coin. What's the worst that could happen? You're gonna play DK 64 and have to collect 5 billion objects? No, you'll be fine. It won't crash. Keep going. Keep betting on Junebug against your friends. He'll definitely keep winning. I don't know. It's fun. It is fun to root for it. It's fun. It's fun. I think a lot of people like it. Melee is an old game, right? Been around for 500 years, and there's still new stuff happening. I think I remember a few years ago, they were even saying in Street Fighter 2, which is 10 years older than Melee, I think they were saying Doll Sim was starting to change on the tier list. And I think even a few years ago, I think they were saying, I think they had Luigi as the worst in Smash 64, but I think they started saying like he was getting a lot better. So this stuff changes. This stuff changes even in games older than Melee. So it's as long as players are innovating, I think these things are going to change, which I think is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, this is what keeps the scene alive. These new developments. It's
yes.
The fact that there's so many questions about it, that it's just such this hype thing happening is a great thing for the game overall.
Yes,
but it might be too much hype, and people might be overrating the character as well. So that's
Now that being said, I will leave you with this, DK enthusiast and DK enthusiast nation. I have it on a current top 15 player and a very intelligent person's word that DK beats Fox. Now, I'm not saying DK beats any other high tier. I'm not saying that, which is very funny.
Fox is crazy.
But there are some really good players that do believe it, and some very smart people that do believe it. And we don't have to get into it. And I've said this on stream, and it's funny because there are a lot of DK believers out there, but when I hear that, they go, okay, now come on. And so I don't have to go fully into it, but DK's back here can outrange a lot of Fox's stuff. DK can hit harder than Fox off of his grab versus, Fox getting an opening where he's usually not killing DK, but DK can kill Fox off an opening or at least get more damage on average. And DK can also edgeguard Fox quite well in a flowchart where even a lot of even higher tiers, like Peach is not really edgeguarding Fox that reliably, as an example. So I will leave the DK Nation with something. I won't be too much of a doomer. I will leave them something, and it'll be interesting to see how people sort of interpret that. But I want to at least allow that to go out there so that I don't seem too biased, that I don't look like I'm a giant hater. After all, my
DK?
mind.
He's epic.
Well, if you play Melee at a high level, you probably don't like playing against that character. He is kind of, if you play other fighting games, he is like akin to a grappler in fighting games. Basically,
but he's a funny monkey, though. Come on.
Okay, well, again, if you're playing against it, there's nothing funny about it. But
I did see Cody was expressing a bit of frustration towards the DK matchup recently.
Yeah, and he labbed that out. He said, "Okay, I want to play against DKs, Pikachu, Samuses, these mid tiers that are starting to beat me or give me a hard time because I need to really. I'm getting punished for not working on it. He's ahead of the meta kind of in that way. He's not going to wait around and let himself keep losing. And then he played Junebug after Junebug beat Josh Man. He took a game off Mango. And Cody, for two of the games, just annihilated Junebug, like double three stock. And then the last game was closer. I don't think Cody maybe played as tight in that last game. Not to say Junebug couldn't have won, and not to say, I mean, Junebug still dropped stuff, so that could have certainly been closer. I think even in the games where they were three stocks, maybe Junebug could have won that game as well. Junebug more focused on his neutral than his punish game, even with DK, who has a relatively streamlined punish game. But yeah, so there is that aspect. So again, I try to balance it as kind of one of the words for today. Balance it, give people a full perspective on it. Um, I don't know. I'm suddenly we're almost 2 hours into this, and I'm realizing I'm a little self-conscious that we've talked so much about the melee aspect of it. We haven't related it back to Pokemon. I really liked when you used that slacking example. Actually,
Oh.
I don't know if there's a corollary to whatever I just said about
Um,
Cody and practice and the Junebug matchup that relates to slacking, but maybe that'd be a funny thing to say.
Well, yeah, Slaking is an interesting Pokemon because it has do you know how Slaking works? It's an
It,
interesting
it
design.
has insane power and defense, but it has to rest for a turn,
Yeah,
right?
every other turn it can't act. So it's like
Yeah,
this insane debuff. But
yeah.
Blues is just this player who is just crazy, who no you can't really predict what he's going to do. So Slaking basically is really fast and in the lead position, you have a lead. Turn 1 you send
Okay.
out the Pokemon. Against like all of the standard leads in Pokemon, Slaking is faster and can threaten them in some way with like either a
Oh.
KO or at least damaging them beyond repair. And Slaking also has something for every common switch out. So potentially Slaking could start the game off with like an insane early advantage and just like destroy you.
Is that a net neutral though? Because the slacking hits you for a lot, then you hit him, and then he rests,
The way you
and then
do it is you switch out and back into Slaking and just to bypass that.
oh, because you
You just don't do that.
yeah.
You just don't sit there and waste your turn. You got to preserve the Slaking, but then it's exploitable, right? Because
Yeah, because they can predict what you switch into, but I guess you have to predict. But then I guess as the switcher, you have to think, okay, well, what do they think I'm going to switch into? And you just switch anyway, right? Like, is it ever worth it not to switch and just like let
the
them
big
hit you with
problem is
something
that
instant?
Slaking can't just keep spamming moves and staying in and destroying everything. Eventually, Slaking is punished and loses momentum because once it doesn't attack, it's just sitting there. So something can come in and like Dragon Dance or like get some spikes on the field or like do
Oh.
something to punish Slaking. So Slaking will get a KO, which is huge, but then they come in with like Tyranitar and they boost up or something.
Mm.
So, you know.
So the expected value is a lot better on the Switch. I see. So then is this guy? Does he ever just not switch once in a while? You can't predict what he's going to do. Maybe he just doesn't switch once in a while.
There's not much benefit to not switch it because you just sit there. Well, it depends. Sometimes you can take the hit because Slaking's bulky.
Right.
And then
Right.
you
That's
just
what
do
I
it
was
again.
saying.
Yeah, sometimes. That
Yeah.
actually can
But
come up.
Yeah. Okay, I see. That's fun. I like that. It's not really like DK in that sense, but I do like it a lot. I guess no. You know what it's
It's
like? It's like how DK can't really approach, and like you can't even really throw out back air a lot. And DK used to be back air the character. He has a really big back air. He's like Puff in that way, where he throws out his one move, and then if he can get a grab, sometimes that's cool. But like in modern DK, like back air has like too much lag, so he gets punished for it a lot. So he can't even do that. So he like mostly fishes for the grab.
the real
And so-
similarity is that they're both big monkeys. In terms of actual
Right.
gameplay, I mean, there's some differences, I'll admit. But
Yeah, the
But,
switch
you know.
up. I guess the switch up is you don't switch, or the switch up for DK is maybe you go in. I guess
it's all about
I
what
guess-
move you click. Because usually you use a choice span, which means well, that doesn't really matter.
Ah,
But you just hit so hard that you can one hit. Because like Gengar can come in who is immune to normal time.
Right.
So
Right,
if
right.
Gengar comes in, you're boned. Like you just
Yeah.
lose so much. But if you Shadow Ball them, which is super effective on Gengar, enormous, right? So
Mhm.
you can also Focus Punch Skarmory. That's a big one.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like that. I like this little crossover. I don't really know. I would assume that there are going to be people that are going to watch this that are going to play both that maybe would have. I don't know. Hopefully that they'll appreciate this conversation, even though it happened way later. If they haven't already been
I'm
upset
sort
by
of
the
twisting
brilliant
it to,
Pokemon.
to relate them both. But there are, I mean, I did make a video called The Melee of Competitive Pokemon about Gen 3.
Okay.
Where I did
Nice.
try to relate the two games in that they're
That's
like,
fun.
they're older installments of a franchise that people return to because of their unique mechanics and like this metagame that is simultaneously, centered around specific threats. Like you always see Tyranitar Armory swamp it. But sometimes cool stuff props up. Like this DK thing is adjacent to, the rise of like Metacham has recently been going crazy. Regice had a moment last year.
Oh, wow.
And like there's always something that comes up. And then there's like checks and balances where there's like adaptation to that. And it goes in circles a lot.
It's interesting. I don't feel like a character has come up and fallen far from grace to where it doesn't get used. I think that happens more in Pokemon. I think in Melee what happens is like players will play less, or they'll focus on other things less and their results won't be as good, or certain players will leave. Like we haven't seen Peach get the same results since Armada, for example.
That's true.
And we saw Laud starting to get close to that. Like Laud had beaten Zane, and then Wally was able to beat Zane, but then Laud was also beating like Leffen, and Laud was beating other people, but then Laud became a doctor, and he decided he was too good for us. He got tired of beating us, but so Peach can still do it. Peach is still really good, but it's a matter of player difference. So Peach went from being considered like some people even back in like the Brawl days even thought Peach was a top tier. Not me though, but some people thought Peach was a top tier. But now Peach often, the way most people think about her, sits like at the bottom of high tier. So there has been that movement downward, but I think a lot of it is more the player. So it's kind of interesting. That difference. But it's kind of interesting too, actually, come to think of it, is maybe it works out the same. Like in top 8s, we're not seeing many Peaches in the same way, maybe in top cuts of Pokemon, you're not seeing the Regice anymore. Maybe functionally it's kind of similar.
It's interesting. The big difference between the two games is the technical element, where like, I think that the character you choose in Melee is not it's an important factor. And like, their tools matter, but technical skill matters way more. In Pokemon, there's no technical skill. It's just the Pokemon, you just click
It doesn't
buttons.
matter how quickly you input your option. There's still the timer, and you have to wait for them.
There is an element of player expression, though, because no one's really succeeding with slacking except this guy. And there was kind of an Armada-like figure in Gen 3 called the Linear Curve, who had this like logs period of dominance, and he would just use crazy stuff, and no one understood what the hell he was doing. Like he would bring like Jumpluff and like Machamp. And like these weirdo Miltank, and people are like, "What is this team, and why am I losing?" So
and I love, and I think that's something that Pokemon really. I think this is a unique thing to Pokemon where you can have this like. I think the closest thing comparable to Melee would be like you have these what we call off-meta playstyles or off-meta reads, where you can like play in a way that counters a lot of meta options. So like let's say it used to be very common for Marth players to do an aerial and place and dash back, or a down tilt and place to dash back. So you'd have a lot of players that would play more basic, that wouldn't try to do all this fancy technical stuff, that maybe would just like wait a second, then they would overshoot against Marth players. And it's like a really goofy option, like that usually like quote unquote bad players do. But it works against like the meta option that Marths were all picking at the time. And now Marth players don't do it so much, partly because of players like that. And so I think in the same way, a lot of players don't usually get good doing like really funky off meta things now. Like usually people often, funnel into like one style, which I guess is kind of like, how it probably goes in Pokemon too. But it's interesting because you're almost saying like you can still succeed, and you can even go crazier in Pokemon with like these if you can, make these good enough calls, these creative picks, these ways these things can synergize, you can create something totally different. And I think, as you get better at Melee, you start expressing in my opinion, you start expressing yourself more and more. And I kind of wonder, is that maybe that's the way it looks, because I think people are so much easier to identify by their playstyle as they get better at Melee. And maybe it's the same case for Pokemon. And maybe some of it will be decision making, but maybe some of it will also be choices too. And that's pretty interesting. I'm sure there's like some carryover, some differences, but that's kind of a fun thing to think about.
Yeah, that kind of thing does happen in Pokemon, where people will practice on the ladder using alt accounts because they don't want people to know what team they're cooking up. And then some random name will hit number 1, and people are like theorizing, who is this? And they're trying to figure it out based on their gameplay. And they're like, oh, it's ABR because he played like this, or like it's just his kind of team or something.
Yeah.
Another Pokemon and Smash adjacent question from Minior. Which Pokemon would you want to see in a future Smash game? Which Pokemon do you personally like the vibe of that would be fun to fight with?
Oh my god, I have streamer brain rot. The first Pokemon I think of is not the one I actually want the most. It's just the funniest one, and that's the ice cream cone, like Vanillux or whatever its name is.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's not my actual answer, but it's just like I have streamer brain, and sometimes I just think of whatever's like the funniest thing instead of like what I actually believe for some questions. A good Pokemon. It's interesting. I think Pokemon is bringing Pokemon into Smash is an interesting question because I think like on one hand, I really like one of my favorites is like Zapdos, right? But on another hand, it's like okay, well this thing also like flies. Like, is it really like how are you gonna grab it? It's like always off the ground. It's like kind of weird, right? Like how does that actually gonna work as a character? And so like this question is not just what Pokemon do I like the most that I want. It's kind of like what Pokemon
What would
like
translate
function.
well, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
interesting
yeah.
you say that because there's this fan-made Pokemon game called Pokemon Close Combat, where it's a
Mhm.
2D fighter with all fighting-type Pokemon. And there is this
Yeah.
alternate form of Zapdos called Galarian Zapdos that is fighting and flying type, and he's in the
Uh-huh.
game. And he has like he's on the ground and he sort of runs like with his wings down, and he attacks with his
Okay.
wing, and he like does this flip
Oh.
kick, and it's actually really well implemented and it's really cool.
Oh, okay.
So that could work.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they do like some alternate universe stuff. I don't know how comfortable the Pokemon people are with that, but that would be kind of fun. I mean, I think when I'm trying to think about it not just from the perspective of like what I would want, but like because I'm trying to imagine myself in the position of like Pokemon, right? Like what is a Pokemon that I think like is going to work well in Smash, but also like be something that appeals to a lot of people, right? Because um I'm Unk, as they say. I'm not. I was born in the 1900s, so what I think are the cool and exciting and interesting Pokemon are not what, maybe the youth, the teens of the world that determine what are cool think are the right Pokemon, right? It's very different. So,
Right, yeah.
thinking, but I think they do like it's not even called a Alolan, even that's old now, but like they recolor Pokemon or
Yeah,
whatever,
it's
or they
now it's called convergent evolution, and people are very particular about this. It's not an alternate form, Jimothy. It evolved convergently. Okay, it's not the new Tentacruel. It's
and
Toadscruel.
they're not giant, they're Gigantamaxing or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Right? But somehow that's a different thing, even though it's the same thing. They just stretch.
Dynamax and Gigantamax are totally different. You
Oh,
know?
that's right. They are different things. You're so right. Oh,
And
I'm
you would be
33
an
years. I'm
idiot to
33
suggest.
years old. I'm 33 years old, man. They can't do this to me. You
You
had
know,
it was cool when they gave Eevee more evolutions, and that's what they needed to keep doing. Why did they change that?
this is great to hear you say this. Sometimes I think the Pokemon community is too in the weeds, and they got to zoom out and look at themselves. And this stuff
uh,
is getting ridiculous.
bro,
Gigantamax, what are we doing here?
I mean, now to be fair to the Pokemon people, what are you going to do? What are you going to do at a certain point?
Yeah,
Like,
it's power
how do
scaling. It
you?
just they got to add more crazy stuff to get you
Well,
hooked.
not even that, but how do you add like more animals, or how do like they like most new
Right.
gens they like they'll do another bird, but they want to do a different bird ideally, right? And so it's like, how do you like I try to take their perspective, like okay, maybe they want a Gigantamax Sandshrew because like some people they want to like retain some of the old heads that watch Wolf Glick stuff and your stuff and whatever. Um, and they're and the competitive crowd and they want and the people that are still growing up with it, but they still want to also create new ones. And like for the new ones, what are they going to do? Like they already did the ice cream cone, like they got to be creatively tapped out. But if there's got to be something, right? Like, oh, what about a chocolate sundae? Maybe that one's been done. I don't know, right? I don't know. I'm not the guy. I don't know. But like that's always my thing, is like I try not to be hard on the Pokemon people, because like that's got to be such a task. And so I really do
They
feel
do
for them.
come
And
up with good ones every gen. There's always good ones.
okay, I
Like
never hear about that.
there's
I
some
always hear
lazy
about
ones where it's
complaining.
like Tyranitar, but he's a robot now. It's like okay, but there's recently one called
Oh,
Tinkaton, who's just a little guy with a big hammer,
okay.
and he's got like low stats, but the hammer deals like 1,000,000 damage and
Oh, okay.
it's the move itself has the slacking effect where you can't use it twice. I think that's pretty cool design,
Okay.
in my
Okay.
opinion.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I'm here for it. Well, little dude, big hammer. Sure, why not? I mean, I don't know what that's based on. I guess it's like more of a competitive idea maybe, but I like it regardless. That's fun.
I don't know how the hammer
But yeah,
got there, but
you know what? I wouldn't put it in anyone else's hands, I'll tell you that. Oh, you know who they need to put in Smash? Slacking. God darn
oh,
it.
there you go. Yeah,
Reward Blue's energy. Reward him for his efforts. Put Slacking in. Put him in, make him better DK, or he's DK but he does DK stuff better, but then he has to vibe out for a little bit.
that would be so bad. You just have to sit there and get comboed.
I don't know, maybe you give him um it'd be kind of funny, like maybe it's like random when the lag happens, but it's like only like a couple frames.
Sounds
So
like a
like you're
Smash
going for
Ultimate
your
character.
It's like you're going for your punish, and it's like going like maybe his punishes are insane, but like there's always like a pretty reasonable chance, like a 10% chance your combo's dropped at some point, and you gotta kind of just like learn to adapt to that. That'd be kind of hype. I don't know. I might be overcooking this a little bit, but I think there's like something in there. Like it would be a nightmare to balance, but it would be like really fun. And then what if they find a tech where you could like cancel moves or something? Like imagine L canceling with this, right? Like this would be fun. I don't mean who knows if they ever bring that back, but it'd be fun if like there was like you had some type of like animation cancel, like if you could predict when it was happening, like maybe it was on a timer, and then maybe you like timed your punish so that you could like edge cancel, and then that would cancel the animation, so then you could continue. But then like let's say your opponent was comboing, and then you're off balance, and then you're in a tough spot, and then normally you would be able to like you can't like re-grab the edge because you go into the animation, so now they can get a kill that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to get. Like that's also fun. I think that'd be like kind of fun for both sides. It would like maybe make like the punish like a little skewed, but I also think it could make it neat. Like there's something fun. Maybe slacking. Maybe slacking's my answer.
That is an interesting design problem. I'm thinking maybe you have like his moves, his normals are really great, but every time he uses a move, it fills up this bar and it depletes slowly. And if the bar fills, he has to lag for a sec. So you got to like be intentional with, you can't spam moves all the time, but your moves are good. So, but if you keep doing them, you truant.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you could also give him like an APM limiter. Like if he does a certain number of actions, he's got to have a cooldown. So you could play in such a way to preserve that, right? You're like sloth-like with your slacking. Like you're like, oh, you're always doing something. You got big moves. You're keeping them out, right? Preserve meter. Or you could like go crazy with him, and then you have to like time your back off, your cooldown. I think that'd be fun.
That's another genius idea. And maybe
Nintendo.
like over time the counter ticks down, so you can like it's like a charge.
Sure. Yeah, I mean there needs to be some counterbalancing mechanic to it, because it'd be too insane otherwise. This is all fun. Or okay, hear me out. Maybe to ensure that you don't go into cooldown, or if your opponent wants to camp you, you could do some resting. Like not the puff resting, but the actual resting.
And it like recharges you.
Yeah, it'll recharge you. Yeah, and maybe it like, I don't know, like very slightly heal you or something too, so like it'll disincentivize camping a little bit. That'd be fun. I don't know. Like obviously maybe you make him a little less busted then to compensate for that, but I think that'd be fun.
I'm liking this idea more. You should be maybe a game designer with these great ideas.
I don't know. I think these are like, I think ideas are really fun, and I think like making this idea would be fun, but I think like actually doing it, I think that's
the
where
actual
like
hard part.
being in the weeds of it, like it is the thing. So I don't know. Like I think I could like be good maybe with the concepts, and like maybe working with someone else who actually like has to like, okay, well, how do we program this? And I go, and then we have to iterate on it. I would need like a team. I don't know if I could like do it on my own. You know what I mean?
You're the lead designer though, with the genius ideas.
Oh boy. Yes. Yeah. I mean, and welcome to my TED Talk. Here's where I talk about why DK and Slacking are peak character design. Everyone clap.
Well, there you go. We've got a question from Gorbillion. If you could eat a Pokemon, which one would it be?
Oh, I've already talked about the ice cream cone.
That's an easy one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not the sandcastle. That would be one of the ones. The first ones. Not muck either, and not for
You don't want a muck soup?
No, I actually really don't want that. I think that would kill most.
What if
people.
it is Muck Monday though? Then would you?
Would I die for Muck Monday? That's what you're asking me. We're 2 hours into this interview. You're asking me to die for Muck Monday. All
Well,
right, no, I feel
some
that.
of us would. You know?
Some people would. Some people for the Vine they would do it. Ah, who's been born in the 1900s? That's what Vine is.
I've not heard that one in a while.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, again, if they're still listening at this point, they're down for the references, I assume. But yeah, no, I think Pokemon to eat. Is there anything? Do they even make edible Pokemon in the
Was it
first
Miltank?
2 gens? Okay, look, I'm not. There is no way I'm saying that. That
Oddish
people.
should fry up some Oddish. That's a plant.
Oh yeah, and Oddish. I mean, like Gloom, like you can see stuff coming off of Gloom, like that does. That's not safe. Like
Well,
maybe the feet, maybe, but that's
maybe
that's not safe.
Tropius you could cut off a leaf and it grows back, and that's like ethical. And you could cook up the leaf like a lettuce,
Yeah,
Tropius lettuce.
I think I think people view Pokemon as pets a lot of the time if they're not battling them. So I think
Well,
people are horrified by this question, but I also think that this is why the ice cream cone is the best answer because this is the only way you could interpret that Pokemon.
yeah, he was asking for it. You shouldn't have been an ice cream cone.
What I mean, what was I supposed to do? No, I know. I mean, yeah. No, you raise good points. You raise a good point with the asking for it that I hadn't considered. Maybe none of them because Pokemon are friends that are not to be
Yeah,
eaten.
there you go.
And I am filled with love and not ice cream.
Good answer. Good answer.
Good answer. Good answer. Please clap.
Outside of Smash, there have been some other platform fighters with varying degrees of success and interest. I personally played Rivals of Aether back in the day when that came out. Nickelodeon was fun, and then there's a lot
Yeah.
of hype surrounding the Rivals of Aether sequel. But
Yes.
Paco the Majestic asked, does the platform fighter genre outside of Smash have a chance, do you think? And what is the potential there?
I actually made a video called "The Golden Age of Platform Fighters" around the time Nickelodeon All Star Brawl came out. Because I recognized that like the success of Melee and really Smash is undeniable. There's just you just can't deny it. Like even 64 is doing good, P Plus is doing good stuff. Like the platform fighter genre is good. It's just attached to Nintendo. And if you made a game that could mimic half, a quarter of the success of those games, but you could, you could have publisher support behind it. I mean, goodness, the success you could have. And I think that's the idea behind Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, multiverses, and so on. And I think publishers are I think they still understand that. I think maybe some of the bigger names are less interested in it, although I think Nickelodeon All Stars has had a reshot at it. Rivals of Aether, I think, is the one that is taking a really interesting approach. I've seen tweets from Dan Fornes. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say his last name perfectly. Please forgive me, Rivals fans, in the comments. But it's something like that. Dan has said he's taken inspiration specifically from Melee multiple times. He said, okay, well, I'm not sure how I want to do this. And he goes, what does Melee do? And listen, the results have been clear. Melee players have played it and they said, this is a fun game. I haven't felt like this since playing Melee. That's a good sign, I think. Now, does it mean that the Melee players are going to quit playing that for Rivals? I mean, Melee players historically only want one thing, and it's disgusting, right? To turn a meme into something else. But I feel like having the addictiveness of Melee, the replayability of Melee, the depth of Melee, the character diversity of Melee, but being a more flexible publisher is really good. And they've made sure that their Rivals community, their core community, is still happy while also catering to Melee players, which is really important. If they gave up their identity to cater to Smash, then they would just be a pitiful Smash clone. But they didn't do that. The Rivals players that I've talked to that have been really invested in the game and have told me about the community are still happy with what Rivals are doing. So they seem like they have the best shot. Rivals 2 isn't out yet, but it seems like it has the best shot. But here's the thing. Even beyond Rivals. Like, let's say Rivals doesn't capture, the market or whatever, right? It does what it does, and maybe it does great, and maybe it even gets a similar size of Smash. Like that would be great. There's nothing really wrong with that. But when I think of the golden age of platform fighters, I think of a game getting bigger than Melee, or Melee growing much more, or something growing past Melee, or getting to the same level, in my opinion, of what Melee has achieved. And I think that's just really good for platform fighters all around. And the reason I think that is because now Melee players can go play this like other thing that can probably like more people will watch on stream, and you can monetize better and whatever else. And that could be really good for Melee players. And conversely, platform fighters can kind of become like the FGC, where like Justin Wong can play Street Fighter and CVS2 and Marvel vs. Capcom and all the versions of Street Fighter and all the versions of Marvel Capcom and Street Fighter X Tekken and King of Fighters and Tekken and all this stuff, right? Because all those skills at least like roughly translate. But in platform fighters, those skills don't translate to traditional fighting games as much. They certainly do. I'm not saying they don't, but it's not as much. But to grow the platform fighter genre, every platform fighter will benefit from another successful one. So this would be really good for every platform fighter if it can happen. And if there's a successful one, maybe Nintendo looks at other ways to develop Smash, seeing the success of that. Is it not that likely? Well, maybe, but they also started updating the most recent Smash game to create it as a service, possibly, and to correct balance issues, except for Steve. So I think there is still movement in that direction on their end, and as a Melee player, I am very reluctant to give Nintendo any credit. So that is how this is genuine. And so I think there is a lot of promise. There's a lot of opportunity in the space. There's a lot of interest. There's even a lot of Melee players, like I said initially, like I don't know how long it's been now since I said it to you. We've been talking. But Melee players are starting to move back away from Melee and play other games more. Not because they're sick of Melee, but they want to explore what else is out there. Maybe they're more gamers first, Melee players second, whatever. But or maybe like discourse in the community is like pushing them out. It's like a lot of reasons that could be happening. But people are looking at more games, and I think Rivals or other platform fighters, as long as they keep coming out, are going to keep picking these interests up. And I think eventually one has to hit. I think it's like the Billion Lions. Like eventually there's going to be some combination of stuff, right, that forms the lion ladder of platform fighters and changes everything.
A great callback to that, yeah.
Yeah, I can't get enough of that. But seriously, I do think that there is a lot of potential, and this really can do so much for the space. And it could be Melee, it could be something else that lifts Melee with it. I think maybe Melee and this other game have a great relationship, or maybe it's multiple games. Riot was working on a platform fighter, and then it got canned. Maybe that comes back in another form, maybe not. But I do think that whatever the publisher is, whether it's indie, whether it's AAA, whatever, I think there is potential to make this something that happens. And maybe Rivals is that game in 20 years. Maybe Melee is where comparatively where Rivals is now, and that's fine. Because I think the beautiful thing about Melee is that it will, I think, always endure as long as something at least as good, if not better, doesn't come on and take its place. Because I think Melee is truly a special game with special history and special sound effects and players and all that stuff. But it's going to take something really special to truly replace it and wipe it out. But I also think at the same time that there are things that can bolster the space and that Melee can add to whatever game comes up. So I think this is not Melee in competition with other platform fighters, not the way I view it. Although I think some people might. I think this is a case of like, how can Melee add to this? How can Melee contribute to this? And how can this thing contribute to Melee? How can we work together to create something better for everyone? That's how I view it. And that's how I would, like to ideally approach things whenever that opportunity does show up. Because I think that is something that really can happen. And we know it can because, we see it in fighting games.
Yeah, and Melee is a difficult game to one-up, I think.
Yes.
It's a unique position for the genre, where Melee has this history and all these storylines, established players, like characters people love. It's hard to build something new, and a new game doesn't necessarily need to siphon players away from other games that they already like. Like we don't.
Right.
You would ideally want new players to rise to the mantle and forge their own stories, but that is hard when compared with when you're putting it next to Melee, who has like all these amazing characters, and then you're like, yeah, there's cool up and comers here, but it's not as exciting. There's always that uphill battle, I guess. But Rivals 2 does look awesome.
And Melee, like I said, can contribute to that. We have people like Mango that will probably play a lot of Rivals when it comes out. Plup will certainly play a lot of Rivals because he's just good at games. He likes doing that.
Yeah.
He was really good at Slap City. He'll probably play a lot of Rivals. So these big names are going to lend their star power, their influence, their skill to these games, and they're going to cross over with the what's his name, Cake Assaults of Rivals. That's kind of the top dog there, from my understanding. And so I think there's going to be this crossover. And again, it doesn't have to be Rivals. I want to be very clear about that. Rivals may be part of it. Rivals may not be part of it. Rivals may be a small part of it. Rivals may be the biggest part of it. Rivals may be a bigger part of it than the Melee part is. I don't know. I'm not saying one way or the other. But I think we don't have to say, oh, like Melee's going to have its own things, like you said, but these other platform fighters will have their own things. And like I mentioned, they'll maybe have a publisher that wants their game to grow, for example, right? That's very helpful. At least if they do it right. True. If they do it wrong, then it's not helpful. But if they do it right, then it's very helpful.
I think Ludwig's company is the one pushing Rivals too, so that's a great sign. I think that is a very good sign.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I hadn't considered that, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
And he'll probably host events for it, push it a lot, and he's great with that, like the event hosting and driving hype and interest.
And he loves Melee, so why not do a Melee Rivals crossover?
Of course, yeah, it's natural.
It makes sense. So again. We have superstar power. When we think of star power, we think of our Mangoes. But we think of superstar power, we have our Ludwigs, right? Which is absolutely exceptional. We're so lucky to have him, and I think Melee is wonderful in that it's been able to connect with so many different types of people.
Yeah, I'm very hopeful for Rivals too. I think it looks fantastic in every way. I love the art style too. They did a great job with. I liked the pixel art for the first one, but unfortunately, not a lot of people vibe with pixel art. That was like a point against it. But the new style, I think, is going to have wider appeal, and it's still very stylistic and just looks great.
Oh, shout outs to them. I really do think they care about what they're doing over there.
Well, we'll wrap this up soon. I got a couple more questions, if that's all right.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you, your profile picture on Smashboards for years has been Sora from Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
So obviously you must be a fan of the series, but is there a particular reason you went with that character for your profile picture on there and stuck with it for all this time?
Well, I'm no longer on Smashboards as of I think about 2 years ago.
Okay.
So it no longer reflects my current tastes, but the fact that someone brought up Smashboards when asking me a question, I think is beautiful. I think that is very cultured and honestly, dare I say, based of them, because I think because if I could have had it, I stayed on Smashboards way past when people were using it. People stopped using Smashboards as a community hub in 2013. I stayed on it. 2 years ago
is pretty recent. Yeah.
Yes. So I desperately tried to get people onto it. We tried to form a what do you call it? A coalition of people to decide on rules, and I was part of it. And I said, "Hey, can we make this on Smashboards?" I was the person that tried to get people back onto the website, and it didn't end up working out. People didn't really use it. I don't really think that was the reason that movement didn't have traction, because even on Facebook, people weren't really talking, which we used more then, but we at least tried. Anyway, but my point being is if I could have had people on Smashboards, I would have, but I've kind of just given up on the medium, unfortunately.
Forums are pretty dead, unfortunately. I have fond memories of forums back in the day.
I wish we could still use them. I really do. I think if we could go back to Smashboards, maybe even a new Smashboards, like I know some old players don't want their old posts coming back. I understand that. Maybe we get a purged version of Smashboards or a semi-purged version of it, so we can get people more on back on board without issues. That'd be great. Anyway, Sora, the meat of the matter, the man of the hour, as it were. I was is a key word here, a big Kingdom Hearts fan. My original Smashboards profile picture was actually a stock image of Mario doing a forward smash because I was a Mario main, but I stuck with him for like half a year, so that fell out of favor eventually. I don't remember when I switched to Sora. I think it was 2010, 2011-ish, I think. But I really liked Kingdom Hearts 1, Kingdom Hearts 2. I liked some of the handheld games. I did not like Birth by Sleep. I didn't get it also, but I didn't like it. But I was a big fan of the story. I liked that Sora was silly. I liked that his strength came from caring about people. I liked his wonder for the world. I liked the mechanics of those Kingdom Hearts games that I played. I thought the fights were fun. And I like the lore of the worlds, and I started learning a lot about the lore leading up to Kingdom Hearts 3, and I really enjoyed that. So I was like, wow, this series is just so good. I have so many reasons to love Sora as a character. Like, the more lore I learn, the more I like it. And then Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, and I played it, and I was like,
Yeah, a lot of people were disappointed by
ooh.
that one. Yeah.
And as a super fan of the series, I was like, I was like, it's okay, you know. I didn't I wouldn't say I hated it, but I think there were issues that some people pointed out, like, the camera, or I didn't like the modern buffer system. I'm not crazy about, because like in Melee you don't have a buffer system, so like moves auto buffer now when you press multiple times, and I mostly play older games, so to me that always didn't feel great. And then like he takes selfies now, and I was like, well, why is he taking selfies?
They did put
I don't.
Ratatouille in the game, which was a good thing.
Listen. I got nothing against the rat. All right, I got no beef with the rat. That wasn't the thing for me. Like the Frozen girl sang "Let It Go," and Sora was like, "What was that?" And he had such a funny reaction, and I was like, "Great, thumbs up, love it."
There
No
was some
problem
funny
with that.
moments in that, like the moment where Woody talks to that dude, and he's just
Oh,
like,
and
"You don't
and,
have
and
any
he,
friends," or something.
yeah, and there's the "Let Him Cook" meme with Woody or whatever.
Yeah,
He
that's
like
that's a
he
good
puts his hands up.
screenshot.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
great
yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. Like, listen. There's a lot to like about it, but the way it ended, and some of the mechanics, and like they replaced some of the voice actors. Like Kyrie's voice actress was different, and like I also, but like I'm gonna be fair about it. I think some of it was just me getting older, and maybe some of the things, like I would have maybe been this way if I had been the age I was then playing Kingdom Hearts 2 in 2005 or whatever it was. Maybe I would have still been that way. Maybe it's just not made for me anymore. Maybe I'm unk now. I don't know, but it just felt like the series wasn't for me anymore. And
There's a
so I
slight
love the
element of that.
character.
Yeah.
So I just feel like the character, I really like the character. I mean, it's my Discord profile picture. It's not what I have now. I have a different one. He was my Discord character up until that too. But yeah, I mean, once I played 3, I was pretty.
Sora's dead to me. I'm
I
changing.
mean, it wasn't right away. Like I spent a year, and I was like, oh, maybe. But then, I was leaving Smashboards, and I was like, I don't feel like changing it, so I'll just leave it for Smashboards for posterity, because like it even has my old gamer tag on it, so I could leave my old profile picture on it. Why not? And so I like the character. I like what he stands for. I like what he's about. But it's just the series just doesn't vibe with me anymore, and that's the thing.
It's a kind of a product of its time, Kingdom Hearts. I got into it more recently, and some things are very dated about it, but it's also got that like 2000s epic feeling to it as well. And it's an
Sure.
inherently fun idea of like anime characters interacting with Disney World. I feel like you
Yeah,
don't.
I mean, I like it. I like the premise of the games, and I like the premise of the Kingdom Hearts specific things. I just They just changed too much, man. They just done changed my thing, and I didn't like the change of my thing. They done changed it. Can you believe it, Jim Cool?
How could they? Ratatouille does not belong in here. It doesn't make sense with the lore. They put Ratatouille in, and that's an outrage.
They did it to slight me personally too. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I suppose we'll leave it at that, PPMD. Thank you very much for this wonderful chat. You've been very enjoyable and easy to talk to.
Thank
And
you.
there's some great wisdom in here, folks, for the competitors out there, or you could apply this to many avenues of life. I think it's wonderful. And I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm an old fan of yours. It's a bit surreal talking to you. I've watched you
Thank you. Thank you.
compete over the years and been eager for your return to the game, of course.
It's gonna be fun.
It's been an honor. Any closing thoughts?
The Lions would win. And on a serious note, this was really great. I like that we got to do a crossover where we talked about Pokemon and Melee. To the Melee fans, I hope you enjoyed hearing from me and catching up with me. To the Pokemon fans, or the people who don't know me, I hope you liked getting to know me, and or at least you thought it was interesting, or at least you laughed a little bit, or you thought this was fun to have on your second monitor while you played a different game, and maybe you heard a little bit of what I said. And this was really fun. It was great talking to you. I had a great time. I always like getting to do interviews and sharing what I get to share with people. Thank you so very much for having me, and I'm I'm looking forward to see the reception to this. Thank you so much, Jim.
Amazing. Take care, PP. See you later.